Hello everybody, welcome back to another Age of Sigmar Warcry video, where today I'm going to talk about warband popularity. And it's not just popularity of warbands, where they're being played in events, that kind of thing. It's more like the actual popularity of the warbands based on their background, based on their miniatures, and a whole host of other things, completely aside from how exactly they do in events. During the summertime, I ran a competition with my supporters in the community tab. Essentially what they were doing for me is picking week on week. They would look at the list of warbands I put out, and they would decide which one was their favorite. They could pick it for whatever reason they wanted, maybe the models, maybe how they did, whatever, anything they liked. And the winner of that week would go on to the next round, and we'd carry on, so on and so forth, until we got to the finals and an overall winner for my community's favorite warband was found. This is how it went. These were all of the groups. You can see it was split into 3 rounds. Round 1, the semi-finals, and the finals. In total, we had 48 Warcry factions take part. Overall, there were 2,257 votes cast, so that's amazing, if you ask me. Each group had a little over 175 votes themselves. And in the group stages, there were just over 1,700 votes that were actually cast throughout the month. Again, thank you to everybody who decided to take part in this. Without you guys, there's really no way that I can put together content like this. And yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting and pretty fun on my side. So I'll be happy to do more in the future as we get more warbands come out and as things change with the game. The warband with the most votes was Ironjaws. They picked up 73 votes in their particular group. Least amount of votes were Demons of Khorne with just 7. And the average amount of votes that a particular warband would have got was 35. So I feel like we had a decent chunk of people actually voting on this. And because of that, I think we can maybe not come to some conclusions, but it at least gives us some interesting data that we can take a look at and try and weave some kind of story based on what we've got. The finals were between Askagan Trueblades and Seraphon, and overall the Askagan Trueblades managed to win it. I didn't expect them to get this far, to be honest. I thought that there were several other more popular warbands, but they managed to do it, so good on them. We're going to look at some data in a minute to see what exactly they did. Here we have the voting breakdown. You can see we've got Ironjaws, Slaves of Darkness, all these guys at the top in red are ones that managed to go through to the next heats. Continuing on down, we've got the middle of the pack, so Unmade, Idoneth Deepkin, Kharadron Overlords. And then going down to the bottom of the pack, it really drops off. If you look at the bottom, we go from an average of about 30 votes right down to the Demons of Tzeentch, Khorne, and Nurgle at 10, 9, and 7. In their particular heats, they just weren't popular at all. And that's kind of something that you can see with all of the God-marked factions, actually. At the bottom here, we've got Khorne Bloodbound, we've got Nurgle Rotbringers, we've got Tzeentch Arcanite, and we've got Slaanesh Cyberites. They may not be at the bottom, but they're very much in the bottom third in terms of popularity. So I find that very interesting that those specific God-marked warbands don't really seem to chime with the player base and aren't really as popular as I would have thought that they would be. Very quickly, if you want to see all the votes in one go, here's everything. This is just in the heats, so a breakdown of how many votes each of the factions got and how they did overall. I'm just going to move to the side here a little bit. I wanted to visualize this data to see what we were doing. So I got some more information courtesy Dan over at the Salty Sea, and what he sent me was a list of all of the warbands in the game, along with how many tournament entries that they had. So if my list was a list of how popular the warbands are based on everything else, the list that he sent me is how popular the warbands are in terms of how people actually play them in events. Now, I know that Warcry, there's a bit of a disconnect between how players play in events versus how they play narratively. Warcry has a very strong narrative following. But what you really see is that when events do take place, the top maybe 20% of the field always come up as the same kinds of warbands simply because of how strong they are in the meta. So for my data, I assigned all of my warbands a number 1 to 48, depending on how popular they were in the heats based on how many votes they got. And then for the list of warbands, how popular they are in events, I did the same thing, except for I went 1 to 48, depending on how many tournament entries they had. I had to lump a bunch of stuff together. I lumped all the Stormcast together, all the Cities of Sigmar, all of that kind of stuff together. Let's go through this, and hopefully we'll be able to come to some kind of conclusions. To begin with, the bottom axis here is the vote ranking, 1 being the most popular, 48 being the least popular, and the y-axis is tournament ranking. So what we're looking for are warbands in the bottom left-hand corner, because those warbands are going to be both popular in events and popular with the community. The lower down on the y-axis, the more popular they are in events and the more they're taken in events, and the lower down on the x-axis, the more popular they are with the community for the other reasons. The first thing to look at are these ones that I have highlighted in green. These are the 10 warbands that managed to top their groups and carry on through the group stages. So I think the interesting ones here are Ironjaw, Stormcast, Seraphon, and Jade Obelisk. They both turn up in events a lot and are fairly popular with the community. Then as you go up the y-axis, you've got Cruel Boys, Dark Oath Savages, True Blades, Corvus Cabal, Slaves to Darkness, and Iron Golems right at the top. So despite being popular with the community, they hardly ever turn up in a tournament setting. Next up, I want to talk about these two outliers, Claws of Karanak and Rotmire Creed. These two managed to get more popularity votes than some of the other warbands in here, but they just didn't make it out of the group stages due to not topping their particular group. I do want to say that I want to do videos on Claws of Karanak and Rotmire Creed. I've done them for everyone else, and I think that that's going to be the next one that I do. So that's something that we can look forward to doing some list building for them at some point in the future. So next up, I've got here highlighted in red, we've got the 3 demonic factions, and very close to Demons of Slaanesh, which I haven't highlighted, but we can see there. Demons of Tzeentch, Demons of Khorne, Demons of Nurgle. Neither Demons of Tzeentch or Khorne are popular at all in events, so hardly anyone runs them. And on top of that, they're not that popular in game. Next up, we also have Demons of Nurgle, which is our outlier. Demons of Nurgle is best known for the Nurgle Chimera list, which is why it would rate particularly highly on tournament entries, but it's just not a popular warband at all. One of the questions that we tend to ask is, among the best warbands, which are the best in terms of the meta? Why don't we see them? That kind of thing. And one thing I want to point out is Kharadron Overlords. And despite being one of the best warbands actually in game, you can see that no one plays them. There are very few Kharadron Overlords entries into events, and on top of that, they're just not that popular. So I think, unlike Demons of Nurgle, which are not popular but people play it simply because of the Chimera, Overlords has another problem. I don't know if that's a hangover from Age of Sigmar, where they were introduced and they were very strong and the community just didn't like them as a whole, or if it's down to something else. Maybe the miniatures don't chime with people, or they don't like the playstyle. Another interesting thing to look at is Soulblight Gravelords down there. Very high amount of tournament entries and reasonably popular. We know that this is down to the fact that people just like Soulblight Gravelords. Skeletons are a cool thing, vampires are a cool thing, so people just like to play them, and it really helps that they happen to be one of the better warbands in Warcry also. So these two lines that I've got here, they represent the top 10 most popular warbands, both for tournament entries and for voting. So again, warbands at the bottom are very popular in terms of events. Some interesting things in here. So we've got things like Sylvaneth, Chaos Legionnaires, Khorne Bloodbound, where people like to take them, but they don't necessarily win all that many events. I feel like Jade Obelisk are in a pretty interesting spot here. They seem to be very popular with the community and very popular in terms of taking them to events, but they don't seem to be topping anything as far as I know. So it's not how strong the faction is that's really influencing people who want to play Jade Obelisk. It must be purely down to how they look, and really how they're performing on the battlefield is kind of secondary to them. Finally, what I wanted to do is highlight a bunch of warbands that are widely thought of to be some of the best in the game. So we've got Soulblight Gravelords, Horns of Hashut with their extremely efficient Shatterers, Ossiarch Bone Reapers with their just all-around very good basic infantry, Demons of Nurgle, of course, because they can put forward the Chimera list still, and Kharadron Overlords. A few months ago, I talked about Warhammer Fest. I talked about the UK meta, what you would expect to see and how you would expect to beat it. These results kind of almost tally in with those, because I said we would see a lot of Ironjaws, Stormcast, Seraphon, and Soulblight Gravelords, which we most definitely did. And I said that Kharadron Overlords was probably the warband that you wanted to play in in order to beat those. And considering that Kharadron Overlords are still one of the better warbands in Warcry, and no one really seems to be playing them, I really do think that if you're planning on going to an event, maybe Kharadron Overlords are the ones that you really want to be looking at, because they do have favorable matchups against most of those top represented warbands, and it's something that you can probably be very successful with. And that's it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that everybody enjoyed this tournament that I ran over the last couple of months. It was pretty interesting for me to take a look at the different warbands and to list build for them. I am going to be looking over a bunch of the warbands that came in second place, and we'll do more work on those. So yeah, that's something that we can look forward to in the coming weeks. I think it was pretty interesting to see which warbands, at least from a totally not competitive perspective, really chime with people and how they like them. I think it's interesting to see that you do have warbands that are very popular in a more casual setting versus when people go and play in events in order to try and win, in order to try and top those events. As always, if you like what you're seeing, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know down in the comments below what you thought about the event. If it's something that you enjoyed, maybe I'll do more in the future. Which of your favorite warbands that maybe you didn't see get into the top cut? Perhaps something that'll feed into which lists I take a look at next. And also if you think there might have been anything that I perhaps missed along the way, I'd be very interested to hear that from you guys. But yeah, that's it. That's it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.